Here we've got a reddish rock. It's actually quite a boring rock in some ways. Many geologists would consider these rocks to be quite dull. It's actually a mudstone, and it's a mudstone that comes from Devon, from the coastline around Devon. What is exciting about this rock is that by looking at the features that we can see in this rock, it's very fine-grained. It's got sort of thin lamination, thin lines representing the layers that it was originally deposited in. This is a mudstone that was probably deposited in an ancient lake many, many millions of years ago on Earth. And geologists look at these types of rocks to try and reconstruct ancient lake environments and map their distribution on the Earth's surface in the ancient past. What's really exciting with the Mars Science Laboratory mission, the Curiosity rover that's exploring the surface of Gale Crater, is that we have discovered a rock that looks very similar, has the similar features to this sort of rock on Earth, and we can infer by that deductive process that the rock on Mars was formed in a very similar environment in an ancient lake. So firstly, this rock on Mars that we've discovered is very, very fine-grained, has examples of very, very thin lamination, and the features that we see there, the sedimentary features we see in these rocks on Mars that have been observed with the rover's cameras, suggest that it was formed in a lake. We don't know exactly how deep this lake was, but there was a standing body of water. Now, what's really great about that is that lakes are great places to search for ancient life. Now, the key aspect of exploring Mars, why we spend so much money in sending missions to Mars, is to explore this idea, this question: did life ever arise elsewhere apart from on Earth? Now, that's a sort of astrobiological question about what this life is, but the key difficulty with that is you've got to find the rocks that might contain that possible life. And it's sort of much worse than looking for a needle in a haystack. You've got the surface of Mars, which is covered in rocks. You land a rover that can maybe travel 10, 20 kilometers in its lifetime, and you've got to find the right rocks that were possibly deposited in an ancient lake that might preserve evidence for ancient life. So it's a hard task. So it's been extraordinary that Curiosity, in the early part of its mission, has discovered rocks that look like this, that from the context of these rocks, these fine-grained rocks that are overlain by sandstones that we think were deposited by ancient rivers, represent an ancient lake environment. Now, we've also done chemical analysis on these mudstones, and so Curiosity has this extraordinary geochemical toolkit with it. It's a beautiful geological laboratory. So what the rover did was actually drill into this mudstone and drilled about the thickness of this rock here. So from the surface, it drilled about 5 to 6 centimeters into the rock body and recovered the rock powder and then ingested it. And some of the rock powder was given to an instrument called ChemIn, which does X-ray diffraction, which works out the mineralogy of the rock. And this instrument showed that actually the rock contained about 30% clay minerals. Now, clay minerals are very important minerals on Earth because they indicate interaction of the rock with water. So there's another signature. Not only do we have a lake, but we have evidence for water-rock chemical interaction to produce clay minerals. Secondly, it put the rock powder into another instrument called SAM, which basically takes the rock powder and heats it up to very high temperatures in a crucible and measures the gases, the volatiles that are given off. And this showed a whole variety of chemical elements were present. Water was given off. We have oxygen, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. And then there's a bunch of other instruments that have done other chemical analyses. And the analysis of this, the chemical analysis of the rock, firstly showed that we have this abundance of key elements that are really prerequisites for life. And by this I mean that we probably have very, very simple microbial life. It's something that geologists and astrobiologists refer to as chemolithoautotrophs. That's a long word, but it's basically organisms that can basically take inorganic elements and use them for energy for metabolism, essentially. And so we found those, and then we also looked at the chemistry of these rocks and were able to say that the lake waters were likely fresh, they weren't too salty, which would not be great for life, and that also the pH was good, so it wasn't too acidic or alkaline. So in total, all of these factors together suggest that these ancient mudstones, similar to these ones that we have from Earth, were potentially habitable for life. So the important thing is that we haven't discovered life. That's not really the aim of the Curiosity mission. It's really to find the right rocks that might be suitable containers, that might host, might have been the places where life flourished and was preserved. And that's the first task of a mission before we can actually set out that really hard task of actually discovering life.